CreativeMornings here at Kaiser and it's CreativeMornings time. Just so that you know, for the ones that are new to our lecture series, it's happening every month in the morning, often on a Friday. And you can see here, it's a global, unfortunately you don't see the map, but you can imagine it. A lot of points here, and we are one of them. We are here in Munich, and we've been doing that for now almost 2.5 years. This is Christina, our main host. My name is Vanya. I will go through this morning together, and we'll introduce you also to the speakers. But for now, I would like to introduce you to Björn. And he will tell you a little bit about what Kaiser is.
Alright, then I try to speak up as well. I'm very happy to see so many people here today. My name is Björn Frank, and I'm part of Kaiser Excep's management. And we're happy to host CreativeMornings here this morning. And it's been a little bit of a gamble, you know, it's Brückentag today, so we're not really sure how many people will show up, if people will show up. And in the beginning, we actually decided, okay, let's keep it a little bit smaller. We're part of an insurance company, play safe. 30 to 40 people maybe to come, and then 2 days into putting this live, we actually realized, whoops, it's going to be 60 people that actually are signing in, and there's also people on the waiting list. So I'm very happy to see that actually almost everybody found a seat. It looks like everybody's almost enjoying also breakfast, so I think it's fantastic that all of you came. And just before we start, a few words about Kaiser X-Labs. What we're doing, we actually founded this company 18 months back, and this was Jan Schminke, back there.
Hello.
Martin Lankau, and we're familiar with the design consulting business as well, and been around in Munich in the creative scene for quite a bit, and decided to found Kaiser X-Labs as a creative space for Allianz here within the Kaiserstraße. And within the 18 months, we actually quite a bit staffed also our team. So we grew the team from 3 to now 30 people that continuously working with us, innovators, designers, researchers, strategists, and creative technologists that we actually have here to shape the future of insurance and sometimes shake it a little, like some of our colleagues might say. And I think it's been an interesting journey that we had together, and I just want to tell a little story about our serendipity that we share together with these folks that, like it always is, sometime before Christmas last year, we have a project, we need to stuff it. It of course needs to be stuffed before Christmas, and it needs to start right in January. And the former board member of the design consultancy that we used to work, Martin, Jan and I, before, who's also part of the University of California, and he's actually leading the innovation program there. He's emailing us and saying, hey, there's these fantastic folks that we that have been studying with me and been part of my program, and now intend to move from sunny California, coming over here from the startup scene in the US and coming over here to Munich. Do you have any interest? And of course, we said, oh, perfect timing. I think it was 2 days into stepping into the ground here in Munich that we actually been co-working and been working together and shaping and shaking also with them the future of insurance. And yeah. Their story is now the story of Serendipity that will give a little bit more detail to what Serendipity is. So I'm very happy to host again this event. And
Okay, so before we start, we do have to say thank you to quite a bit of people. First of all, for getting sponsored by Shutterstock. This is our international supporter. And then we've got Tragini, that's here on the right. If you have not tried it yet, try it afterwards and you will be awake. And this is our team. Today, I want to give a special thanks to Adrian. He is on the video over there. And where is my video? So we are actually a quite big team. Just last year we started and renewed and refreshed our team, and you can see here that we have grown to quite a bit of creative teams. And I hope you will come and join us in other events that we will host, and you will get to know us a little bit better, because we also seek for inspiration on a daily basis. So just talk to us, come to us, and perhaps you are going to be one of our speakers the next time. So here's again, if you want to be a sponsor for locations, for breakfast, and if you want to become also a photographer in our sessions, come and speak to us. And if you want to be on social media and you want to post something that we're going to talk to you today about it, these are the hashtags that you can use. And yes, Björn already mentioned it, it's about serendipity, and I'm going to hand over to Tony and Franzi. Have fun.
We're very excited and we're humbled to be here with you this morning. We want to give a big thank you to the CreativeMornings team for their time and their commitment for building this amazing community. And we also want to give a big special thank you to the Kaiser X Labs team here for welcoming us into your home. So thank you. My name is Tony Lee. I'm an entrepreneur, a design strategist, and previously a physiotherapist from Vancouver, Canada. This is my partner in crime, Franzi Sessler.
Hello. I'm a designer, originally from Munich, born and raised here, moved to San Francisco, now I'm really back here.
So, as Franzi said, together we moved from San Francisco to Munich about 6 months ago. And we started a company called Creatives, which is a business innovation and design company, and we believe in our mission, which is to put together the power of business, design, technology, and eventually capital to design a world or a future that we all want to live in. We also put together an event series here in Munich called the After Hours, where we try to create these serendipitous moments by connecting people to new ideas in a wider network. So we're excited to share our story of serendipity to you, and we hope to inspire action, and we hope to get you guys motivated to go after the things that mean the most to you. So when I was doing research on the word serendipity, I was bombarded by these terrible Google image searches where serendipity has been romanticized in Hollywood. There's bad quotes. Businesses are using serendipity to represent their business. Likewise, there's processes out there that teach you how to have this luck. So the first thing you need to do is have a prepared mind. Then some sort of unexpected event's going to happen. You're going to recognize your potential and seize that moment. However, serendipity first shows up in the English language in 1754 by this British man named Horace Walpole. So he was writing a letter to a friend after reading this crazy fairy tale about the three princesses Serendip. And he wanted to express this accidental discovery in a detective way. So the story of the three princes of Serendip goes something like this. There's these three princes, they were traveling these strong lands. And they bump into this merchant. And the merchant asks, "Hey, have you seen my camel?" The three princes right away ask the merchant, one, is your camel blind in one eye? Two, is it missing a tooth? And three, does it have a limp? Yes to all of the three questions. The merchant accused the prince of stealing their camel. But the princes, they'd never seen this camel, except they made these observations in their journey. That they saw, hey, there's weird footprints that are happening. The grass is eaten unevenly, and every time there's a bite mark, there's a gap. There's in there. So right away through those observations, they didn't know what the result of it was going to be. However, they concluded that, okay, you know, this is probably their camel. So when was the last time you accidentally discovered something? What were the moments that connected backwards? So every day we're faced with accidental discoveries in innovation, in design, and scientific discovery. Who here has taken the blue pill Viagra? That was a trick question. So Viagra, originally, it was an accidental scientific discovery. It was originally designed to lower blood pressure for people with hypertension. Except it was better at stimulating a different part of the body. So you can imagine all these old guys are now celebrating that, hey, you know, I'm healthy up here and I'm healthy down there. In terms of excitement, in 2009, I got accepted to the Masters of Physiotherapy program at the University of British Columbia. And I thought that I had a bright future ahead of me in healthcare. Except for one thing. On the 23rd of September, 2 weeks into the program, I was studying very late till 11 p.m. at night. And I was driving home, and I ran my first stop sign. And everything just, it's like the Matrix where the world just slows down. And I saw this light coming onto the left side. And this happened. So I almost lost my life. And if you see where the impact is, if it was about maybe a split second, full speed, you know, the outcome could have been different. However, you know, I was lucky. I walked away with nothing but a scratch on my knee. And the next day, I was partying with my classmates at the fall ball. So this was our initiation party. To the untrained eye, on the outside, I looked fine. However, it wasn't until about 6 months later that I was getting headaches, I was getting pain everywhere, and I needed help. So here I am in a profession where we're trained to heal people, trained to heal injuries, and we're trained to rehab people after these accidents or these pivots. Appointment after appointment, I wasn't getting the results that I was looking for, and I still had a lot of pain in my body. So here I am in this profession where I quickly realized that so much of the thinking was based on the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, where someone had an idea that said, hey, this could help, and everyone just believed it. And in the medical world as well, we give so much hierarchy to evidence-based practice and scientific papers. For me, that's nothing more than a researcher who's not a clinician at most times, needs to continue doing studies so that they can get a job in academia. And so they have this idea, let's test out this hypothesis, and if it's validated, it's one fucking piece of information that is then applied to everybody. I was really lucky. Through my journey, I met 2 amazing physiotherapists that actually helped me. But they also taught me a new way to look at the form of the musculoskeletal system of the body. And they taught me how to look at it from a very holistic perspective. And I'm not talking about spiritual stuff, I'm not talking about hormones, but they just taught me to look at the body not from a narrow perspective, because, you know, an ankle can affect your neck, etc. I can put reasoning behind all of this stuff. And so if you look here, this is a lady I treated who, about 40 years ago, she had a surgery on her foot, and the surgeons decided to screw her foot in a position lower down so that she can wear high heels at the time. And everyone told her that she was not able to regain mobility. She saw different doctors, physios, and if you have this perspective that you're not going to be able to discover something new, you're not going to look. And so she came to see me, and after an hour, it's not perfect, but you can see how the foot is already softening, and we got some of the mobility back. This is a snowboarder that I was working with where she had trouble doing full rotation in her trunk. And you can imagine when you're snowboarding, you need to be able to turn, you need to be able to have shock absorption, etc. And we're taught to look at trunk rotation or the back rotation through joints and muscles back here. However, if you think of the rib cage as a ring, anything in that ring can affect the entire rotation. So this is a video that I'll just show you. So you can see she's not able to turn past there. And I look at the trunk like a slinky, so I'm unwinding it. And I'm not doing it through back there where we were initially taught. You can see how much more rotation that she gets. And so if I can manually do that, automatically I think that, okay, this is something we can fix. It's not a problem. And so my dream was to travel the world with in the Olympics, to work with sports teams. I was lucky that I got to travel with a bunch of the national sports team, but the snowboarding team was probably the best experience. Not because this was my office every day on the mountain. It's that I wasn't limited to the constraints of a clinical environment where you had to do this, or you only have this much time to work with people. I was able to, I worked with maybe 6 to 8 athletes, some that eventually went to win X Games gold medals and Olympics. And what was really cool was that snowboarding, it wasn't a sport that has so much scientific information about it, and you have to do things the way that it's been done. We got to play. We got to prototype, as we call it in the design world that I learned now, where we got to take these athletes to the top of the mountain, we'll film them coming down, and I'll work with them for about an hour, 2 hours, and they'll go back up, and we'll see how much efficiency has changed, how much faster are they, how much easier is it for them to come down the slope. However, I went back into the clinical world because traveling with sport is not a sustainable lifestyle. And I hated it because I wasn't getting the results that I had when I was working with the sports teams. Partly because I was constrained to the business model of having to see multiple people at a time, and which actually is an externality from insurance, in the sense that the insurance provider would give the physio like $12 per person in order to make ends meet, you need to see X amount of people. Likewise, I always think that windowless rooms, white walls, and bad art isn't a place that anybody wants to come. So I decided to start my practice called Physio for the People, because I wanted to design the end-to-end experience for the customer. And also I was playing around with different digital tools to see how I can streamline the entire process, and also playing around with the different business models. So it worked. 2 weeks into my practice, I was already had a wait list of 2 months. Made a lot of money, then I kind of got bored. However, I was able to see a lot of complex cases, which I just find really fulfilling. And so this is a quote that from one of my patients that when she was a kid, she was at a boat and an anchor had fell and hit her head. So after a couple of treatments, she wrote, "Today I held a mug of tea in my right hand for longer than 15 seconds. And even though I was shaking, my tremors calm enough that I can hold a mug without the hot water jumping out on me and burning my hand. I can't think of the last time I've been able to do this. Maybe as a child. I thought you'd be proud." I needed to do more. I was constantly having this battle with myself of just spending time in a room all day with one person. I wasn't at my potential. Then one day I had a patient come in, and his name's Mark. He would always tell me all these stories of how he would travel the world, do all these cool projects, how he got into Harvard, how he had this amazing network in San Francisco, and that's something I wanted, but I didn't know how to do it. And one day there was a party at this co-living space called the Embassy in San Francisco. If you ever go to San Francisco and just need a place to crash your bed, get into the Embassy network. There was a party, and here I am for the first time in my life, surrounded with people that work for Google, Google X. There were neuroscientists. There were people building startups for satellites in space. There were lawyers, and I knew I needed to be in San Francisco because I felt very lonely being a healthcare entrepreneur in Vancouver. So on my way back to the airport in a taxi, I actually saw a poster for this design MBA program. And at that time I had no idea what it was, but I knew I needed to be in San Francisco.
All right, so San Francisco it is. My mom had a surgery in the 80s where she lost her fertility. So 99% of everything down there was taken out of her body. She was a sailing teacher, and after she recovered from that treatment, she wanted to go sailing the first time in her life in San Francisco. She's never been there before. So she was traveling right here in that little boat, and she got seasick. Her crew made fun of her like crazy. They made fun of her and laughed, and deep inside she was worried that she would have another tumor. So she went to the hospital, and they found a tumor, but the tumor had 2 legs and 2 arms. And that was me. And she named this little baby girl after the city she discovered in Francisco. So I was born into a super weird family. And with that, I really don't mean those 2 people in that picture. I love them to death. I mean the generation before that, and another generation before that. While my dad's family side was suffering from World War II in their own ways, it got a really lot messier on the other side of my family. So my great-grandma, Nona, over here, was a German resistance fighter. She was politically active and a target to Hitler. So she went through 11 years of fights and concentration camps, torture, you can imagine it. Her husband did as well. And she's the most courageous woman, but that's a story for another day. She was a fighter, and she died in 2012 with 105 years old. By the way, she was a physiotherapist. So you might wonder what all this story here makes out of a little girl growing up. So this old lady was explaining the world to me, and I was the most curious, little annoying girl that you could imagine. I asked more questions than anyone else, and most of the people wouldn't like to spend time with me because it was just like, why? So what started as cute ended up being a rebel growing up as a teenager, because I was questioning everything, and I was just bored by teenagers playing with Barbie still. So with 13 years old, I started my first anti-fascist punk rock concert in Marx Indersdorf, where I thought I could fight the world of racism, yeah? I so thought I could do that and change the world. I also figured that I was a rebel at school. The concept of fitting into a box and writing things in line just didn't match with my way of understanding the world. When I asked my Nona why this shit happened to her in her life, she couldn't explain 1, 2, 3. She couldn't. There wasn't a reason for that. So it was an entire system that worked together. So when I take notes at school, it looked more like this. And in preparation for this talk, I actually went back to my attic and found a Latin book for you guys. My parents had to pay every single year for the books I drew. Because that's just the way I remember things. And probably I remember more of those stories than any of the classmates back then, because I made them up in my head so I can understand them. I also understood that I have this passion for visual communication and the power that pictures could have. So I wanted to study art or psychology to understand the human brain and why they behave the way they behave. So I was really inspired by those pictures that would tell better stories than any novel could ever tell me. And then I studied design. And when I was at design school, I was confronted with my classmates that were more working on this world and asking, like, which logo do you like better? And I would say they all suck. Like, why are we having this conversation? Why are you doing a logo at all? And the deepest conversations you could listen to in a cafeteria was about Helvetica and which font to use. And I'm like, this is not meaningful at all. So I started working as an art director for a small full-service design agency here in Munich. And besides all the client work for the companies that you all know, like BMW and Siemens and all of them, I discovered that I really have a passion, and I saw a magical moment when people come together and co-create. So we were throwing all of our ideas on the wall. We were throwing ideas on the wall. That was planned, by the way. We were throwing ideas on a wall, and I was standing there, and I saw, just like I was thinking in school, things were connecting in a system. And we discovered this super awesome, revolutionary idea that our client would have never expected. And then the next day, we were presenting it to the client, and the client said, well, you know, can you just make my idea look pretty? Because I know business, I know my clients, I know what they want, and you just know how to make things look pretty. I was so mad. I went home the same day, and I was telling my mom, hey, seriously, my job is not being an art director or thinker using my brain. I'm covering shit in gold. Shitty ideas, shitty concepts, shitty strategies. I'm just doing shit. This is not what I want to do. So I knew I had to do something about that. So I thought, okay, my team was not at its potential. I saw the magic happen when people co-create. I was frustrated with the design world. This entire concept of design was like, this is not what I want this profession to be. So I thought, okay, let's go back to design school and learn more about it, because clearly I didn't get it. But I was afraid that that was more covering shit in gold in a deeper way. And then I thought, okay, I could go to business school to tell that fucking client that my idea was better than his. But I saw myself in the roles of those people, and that's really also not what I wanted. So I was reading Novum or Slanted or one of those magazines, and I saw this advertisement for a design MBA. And I thought, bam, that's it. And then I Googled it, and I found out it was in San Francisco. I'm like, okay, this is the place I gotta go. And then I forgot about the $120,000 you need to study this without living costs. So I Googled biggest scholarship you could get to study in the US. And I found one. I submitted all the application material that I had to meet the requirements and did all that. And when I sent it all off, I realized that this Fulbright scholarship that I before never heard of was the most prestigious thing you could get in the US. 57 Nobel Prize winners were Fulbrighters, and people like Muhammad Yunus and Dolph Lundgren. So I thought, yeah, right, you don't have a chance at all to get in there. 6 months later, my boss had the champagne bottle ready in the fridge for 6 months because he knew I would get it. I was invited to Berlin to take on this honor to be sent to the US as one of the most brilliant people of Germany. And here I am meeting the most brilliant people, like 19-year-old PhD student, crazy engineers, and me who can draw. And I was super proud coming back to Munich and opening my mailbox, and I have a letter from CCA, and I open it, and it says, "I'm sorry, we don't have a spot for you in this program." And I thought, yo guys, fuck you. What do I do now? So I was hyperventilating. I was literally hyperventilating. I was sinking down, I remember it like yesterday, sinking down on my bathroom floor and just sitting there. And back then my best friend Patty came over with a bottle of whiskey. She knows how to cure me. She came with a bottle of whiskey, listened to me for an hour of complaining at this world and how ironic is that, blah, 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 blah. She said, you know what, take another sip, take a deep breath, and then start fighting it. Never see you that week. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm sorry. So I searched for the phone. It was midnight, so I could call someone in San Francisco. So I was calling San Francisco. No one answered the phone. I was prepared for this big speech of why I have to get this, why I have to get in there, but no one picked up. So at 5 a.m., when I didn't reach anyone, I called my boss and said I have to take a few days off, and I flew to San Francisco. So I went to that college, and I found the campus completely empty. I found a security guard and 5 graphic design students in the first semester studying over the holiday. And I asked them what was going on here. It was spring break. Of course no one was there, and of course I didn't reach anyone. But because I told everyone my story, even the security guards, they connected me to the head of admissions in that college. And they were like, oh, there's in that building over there, 3rd floor, top right, go there, maybe he can help you. So I went in there, bulldozed over that guy, and 2 days later was in the program. And here I am, super excited to start a new life in my new apartment in San Francisco, and it was really just that big. But I was so excited to start from scratch. And I wanted to celebrate myself at that first evening event to meet all the future classmates. And no one wanted to drink whiskey with me, besides this one guy. And so I still have him on my phone as the drinking buddy, by the way. And the next day, we were hungover, the rest was fine. Everyone was introducing themselves to the community of design MBAers that we studied together. And there were plastic surgeons from Sweden, and people that had 3 master's degrees in sustainability from India. And this guy who's a physiotherapist and wants to learn about design.
That was the first time our worlds collided. And reflecting on the word serendipity and reflecting in our experience, we started bucketing it because some people find it easier to put things into buckets. 3 different categories or types of serendipity. There's a serendipity where you're born, there's death, and there's these trajectories that push you to a different part of your life. There's also serendipity in terms of scientific discoveries, innovation, design, where you try to solve a problem. And in San Francisco, they use the term intentional serendipity, where you actually create experiments multiple times and you expose yourself to different people, different ideas, and just maybe you'll have that aha moment and get that problem solved. The other serendipitous category is serendipity amongst people. And we learned quickly, after lots of whiskey and lots of airplane flights and nights, that we had a lot more in common than we thought. So here I am in this design MBA program where everyone's an architect, a designer. We had one of the guys actually started American Idol was in there as well. Here I
was 56 years old.
a physiotherapist that doesn't have any visual design skills. And so we learned quickly that if we reframe the word design into solving problems and triggering the right responses, I probably had more flight hours in doing that for people in designing for their body. And so when I also think about the user experience, I think that there's no greater user experience than designing for the body. And also designing different social programs in Vancouver to solve some problems.
So this is super weird. So so many things here. So remember when I said that my teachers hated me for drawing on all the books and not writing linear and essays and all that? In San Francisco, people love that. And one of the teachers saw my notes from one of the guest speakers that was in class, and I said, Franzi, can you do that at a wall? I'm like, I'm not so sure about that. She said, can you do it if I pay you for that? I'm like, of course. So that was the first time I did that, and I learned about this profession called graphic recording. And there's actually hundreds of thousands of people out there doing that, doing a conference, recording things. It's actually magical to see what happens when you have someone visual facilitate a conversation where you want to do something impactful. And that's how I got myself into really, really awesome projects. And the top right was actually one of my first clients. I'm like, what the fuck? Just so awesome.
So it wasn't until I met Franzi that I realized that I can draw. I can only draw people. Because as a physiotherapist, my eyes and my hands are so trained to look at all the vectors of a body that I was able to express it onto paper. So that was my first attempt at drawing the thinking man Rodin after we had a trip to Stanford. And also, this is us competing in drawing Socrates. You don't ask me to draw anything else but people. And so we quickly learned that Franzi looks at anatomy, but she looks at the anatomy of letters, typography. I'll look at the anatomy of the human body through vectors. And so, to give you an example, here's a picture of Kanye West, Yeezy. Franzi would look at that and say, hey, I'm going to look at the postural direction, expression, texture, strength. I don't know what any of that stuff means. I look at the body through vectors of where potential injury could have happened.
So clearly, serendipity can trigger different paths in the life, just as it has done with us. So one of my trips back from San Francisco to Munich, I was hanging with my agency peeps that I still was so in love with in the corporation together. And one of my former colleagues here on the left, Peter, said, oh, Franzi, there is this guy from San Francisco who works also startup, innovation type stuff like you do right now. He's in Munich right now, you should meet with him. So he connects us on Facebook. And the guy says, sorry girl, I'm not in San Francisco, I'll be in New York because I'm hosting a conference at the United Nations, bringing together all impactful leaders, designers, people on sustainability to make this world a little better place. Why don't you and Tony come over? So here we are at the United Nations a few weeks later. And that was probably one of the most life-changing conferences. There's so many bullshit conferences, but that was really, really good. Because there were really smart people from everywhere, the professions from everywhere, telling their most deeply core to their heart stories. And we were actually sitting in Putin's chair. Like that is pretty crazy to think about. So that was one thing, but more important was that I got reconnected to the vision I had of what design could do with the world. Because I saw this sculpture here in front of the building. One of those.
And to give you an example of intentional serendipity, so in San Francisco we were tasked to do a project around food waste. So how might we lower food waste but also make profit and create an impact? And we actually studied the entire supply chain of how food gets lost in the supply chain, and we actually struggled for about 3 to 4 months to come up with a meaningful solution. we had a connection to one of the biggest farms in California. These guys supply 40% of all of Walmart and Costco's produce. You can imagine the scale. And so we went there with our cameraman to actually document what happens when surplus produce and imperfect food or produce gets tilled. And we interviewed the owner, and she said, anytime we have more stuff, or stuff that's ugly, we actually pick up the phone, analog, and we call our entire network to see if anybody wants this stuff. And if nobody wants it, it gets dumped or it gets tilled away. And for us, that was this like serendipitous moment where we're like, holy shit, like what if with a click of a button, you're able to reach thousands of large-scale food buyers? And so that's what we did. We built a platform, and we won a Fast Company Innovation by Design Award through that one moment. And talking about how we actually, in the serendipitous moments, decided to come from San Francisco to Munich. It was Oktoberfest 2016. My best friend from Vancouver came down and co-created with her best friend from Berlin. The next day, we were on stage for Epic Film Night with a crowd similar to this. And they wanted to hear about the failure culture of the Valley, the San Francisco mindset, all the stuff that for us was not that interesting because we just lived it, breathed in it. However, it was really interesting that there were so many people lining up to ask questions after. This never happens over there, and we're like, okay, like interesting, like something's brewing. The next day, it was Franzi's mom's 60th birthday, and we ended up going to a place in Würzburg in the middle of nowhere, and it had lots and lots of wine, and shared to the crowd like all the projects that we were doing in the valley. No, clear.
So good. So we had really, really, really heavy food, and we went for a walk. And when we came back from the walk, the waiter handed us a little piece of paper. And I'll just read this to you quickly. Guten Abend. Ich habe gerade am Nachbartisch Ihre sehr interessanten Ausführungen zum Thema Startup und etc. teilweise mitverfolgen können. Ich vertrete eine Investorengruppe, die sich diesem Thema gewidmet hat. Falls es Sie interessiert und Sie weitere Informationen wünschen, erreichen Sie mich unter folgender Nummer. A week later, we drove to Düsseldorf to meet this guy. He was the press speaker of Gerhard Schröder.
So we knew something was brewing, and if we reflect back into the story of the Three Princes, where they're like, you know, there's these tracks that are weird, you know, there's an animal eating the grass in a different, funny way. This was really funny for us in all these moments. So at that time, I was working for a design company, Franzi was working for a strategy company, and we're like, you know what, this sucks. Like, I personally need to be an entrepreneur again. And that was also the time where Donald Trump was taking his throne. And we said, hey, let's, you know, it doesn't make sense to go to New York or London because we don't have a network. Let's go to Vancouver, where I know some people, or let's go to Munich, where Franzi knows some people. And so we had dinner one night with our mentor, Nathan Shedroff, who was also the guy that founded the program, and he connected us to the team here, Kaiser X Labs. We had a phone call with these guys, and it was so smooth, and they have this vision about shaping the future of insurance, and we're like, hey, we want to shape the future just as it is. And so that was a graphic recording Franzi did from that phone call and the picture that we sent to them after. About a month later, we packed up our bags and decided to move here.
I still love for this homeless lady and taking all our leftovers. That was literally like, we were not even out of the building. She's like, yes! So clearly, we learned that you sometimes have to take a little risk, like the Kaiser guys are doing, trying to shake up the insurance world. Or Tony, who really reinvented and redesigned their experience in healthcare, had a really, really successful company and closed it down to help more people. Like, that is kind of ridiculous for me to think about. And I left the world as an art director, and I didn't give up the vision of what design could do. So for us, serendipity is not so much about luck, it's more about the skill of being a detective or discovering, just like the Three Princes. And we discovered that we can be really world-class designers as physiotherapists, and even business people as punk rockers. So I want to leave you with my favorite quote of Tony. I love this quote so much. If you do what you've always done, you'll only get what you've always got.
I would like to open up some questions to those wonderful people here. So, who has a question? Don't be shy. It's easy.
By the way, in San Francisco, when that happens, there's like hundreds of fingers up.
Don't be afraid. We're probably more nervous up here than you guys are now. French guy.
Why don't you think you would stay in Munich?
Well, I just got my EU blue card serendipitously about 2 days ago, so I'm good to go for 4 years. However, for us, we said let's just like put a flag for a year, see what happens, and if another boat catches, we're pirates, right? We're open to sail.
What does the current company work with creatives?
So the first client we actually had was Kaiser Labs. There's other companies we've worked with working on the future of industry, like how you could better democratize production, for example. But we're also really, really keen on working with startups, like the young creative entrepreneurs, to help create that change and challenge what the big industry and the big companies that we all know is doing since the 60s.
I also want to add in there as well, in San Francisco, the startup ecosystem has been blended from business, design, and technology. And it's really interesting to come here in Munich and see that the design potential and the creatives that are the guys that can make stuff aren't as integrated into the startup scene, whereas the startup scene here we see is a lot of the technologists, the PhD students coming up, and it's really missing a lot of components and pieces. And so that's one of the things that we want to do is to bridge all of the skills together in order to help those guys, but also when I was working at a design company in San Francisco, we always had all these startups come in with a business plan. They had $1 million in funding, but they didn't have any product. They didn't know how to design digital products, physical products, anything. So they contracted us for like $400,000 to make something, but also there was no product market fit. So I encourage the design entrepreneurs here to actually be entrepreneurs.
I just want to add one thing to that, because I personally get really, really frustrated when I come back to Germany, and also see that in San Francisco, in some parts actually, when the designers, the most creative people, are stuck in this agency world where they don't create anything meaningful. And you see them talk passionately about things, and they have these visions, and they want to do something with that, but actually what they do is just work on the next bullshit campaign that no one will care about, or even get like gold awards that are just made up to get a prize themselves, but are not meaningful.
So I'm a New Yorker, also recently moved to Munich.
Nice to meet you. Oh!
I wanted to ask you guys how you stay inspired, because you're still going through the meetings, you're still working with agencies that have very traditional organizational business models. So how do you stay inspired so that you don't believe that you're covering shit and going, or like video shit that's
I think
digital technology?
that is the most challenging part, I think, of the work that we do, and also the most exciting one, because if you have the skill set and the language and the tools in your back pocket to help spark those conversations to get to the right direction you want them to be, that is really inspiring to me when you see like these old industry guys sitting in the leather chairs, jumping out of their seat to try something new and be like, I can change something again. Like that is really, really inspiring to me. I don't know about you, Tony.
I think for me, yeah, that was a real big challenge. And I think I remember your voice from, there was a InsurTech meetup. And someone, were you in it? No? Okay. Okay. That was a different serendipitous moment. It was actually really challenging because I had a really hard time trying to figure out how to stay inspired. How do I get the crazy ideas that were coming from Silicon Valley here? And again, this is something we're still struggling in terms of how to constantly stay inspired. But at the same time, we're constantly looking outside of Germany and Munich for other talks or talking to people, or just walking down the street and we see someone is in pain. Like, we're always like, okay, like, why isn't anyone doing something about this? And so for us, we I don't know, like, every day is kind of, this is inspiring.
And even in like the most inspiring place for us, San Francisco, we still have challenges everywhere. Like, if that is the place of innovation of the world, why the hell are there homeless people coming out of every corner? Like, why the hell? Why are kids on drugs, and why do you need all these schools that host people that are homeless? Like, this is just weird. So that is inspiring to solve like real human problems. I don't know if we should do that actually.
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
That's our ceremony.
So I keep it.
I think both of you took really brave decisions in your life, so I would consider them as brave. So what helped you to take these decisions? So what kind of mindset?
We are often crazy.
It's a really broad question, but maybe, yeah.
So I think now looking back, connecting the dots backwards, for me it was having really big footsteps of my mom's story, my great-grandma's story, my dad's story. Like, all of those stories in my head, they were all like really brave people that just didn't give a shit and always did what they wanted to do. So I think for me it was always checking myself with, is that really what I want to do? And what would they say about me now? So I think that was like my driver.
For me, is really always around, like, what is the worst fucking thing that can happen, right? Like, people look at you funny, or you become poor. And so for me, like, I grew up in a really poor family. I was a first-generation immigrant, and and for us, we were living like, we were so poor in San Francisco. Like, you can make 6 figures and be so poor. And so for us, we're like, okay, like, what's the worst thing that can happen? And I always reflect back into the moment where I had my car accident, and I'm like, okay, that could have been it. So, like, if I died tomorrow, I gained 5 more years there. So every day is just, let's just be bold.
Oh yeah, and also to add to that, showing up, showing up every day at work with a client, a customer, whatever, with the mindset of, I don't care if I get fired, because I just want to do the right thing and not just deliver what they want. Coverage and quality. I feel like this is important that you guys hear the
Maybe repeat this question.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, in terms of, both of you seem to have traditional backgrounds in the sense that you've gone through sort of a company or gone through a track, let's call it. To what extent do you think that actually has helped you to be disruptive versus people starting out in the design industry, coming from more traditional backgrounds but not having that much experience in traditional tracks, trying to now be sort of innovative and disruptive?
So, to be frank, I didn't have that much experience in the normal design track. I actually figured out in the end why I didn't get accepted to the MBA program, which was because it was too young, and they assumed that I didn't have enough experience in the design world. They wanted people with at least 10 years of design practice, which I didn't have. So I personally believe that you can do whatever on whichever track you are. If you have that moment that you decide you need to turn to a different direction, it doesn't matter if you're in a traditional track or you're coming in from left field anyway.
Yeah, I think actually it depends on what you want out of your career. If you wanted to work in a corporate company, perhaps, and be like a manager, whatever, maybe these are the tracks that you need to go. But if you want to be an entrepreneur, it doesn't really matter, right? Because as an entrepreneur, you have to figure out things really, really fast. And I actually read a really, really interesting quote yesterday that said, an expert is someone that's going to tell you that something can't be done. And so for me, like, going through physio, and I actually dived really deep and got all these certificates that I just didn't care about anymore, was I needed to understand the foundation of how something worked in order to break it after. And at that time, for me, like I was taking courses in photography, I was taking courses on philosophy because I was trying to understand how someone else is looking at the same thing but from a different lens, and what does it look like, and what happens if I just put on a mindset of a philosopher and ask different questions for this problem.
I have a question on serendipity and ups and downs in your life, because when you have an up moment, successful moment, that's, I guess you can apply to serendipity and say that was great. But how you deal with the mentality of serendipitous thinking and the downs you have in your life, the failures?
Yeah, so I sort of look at failure in terms of getting closer to product market fit, actually. The faster you fail, the faster you learn. And if you have the mindset like, oh, I failed, this sucks, my life is over, you're just going to drag yourself down there. I hate to quote this, but Steve Jobs says you can't connect the dots moving forward, you can only connect the dots going backwards. And you don't know if that failure was something good that's going to happen, that maybe you didn't get that job, or maybe this project failed, but you gain some insight from this project that you can carry to the next thing. And again, you can try to design for the future and these serendipitous moments, however, it's just, you can't.
So are you saying just have to be positive about everything?
Maybe Franzi's a more emotional one.
I actually was about to say something really emotional. No, last year my dad passed away surprisingly from cancer, and that is something you can't just look over to like, yeah, just be positive about it. Like that just doesn't work. But what it does is actually I realized that I have so much of his like, I don't give a shit in my body, that makes me just stronger in making the decisions that I make moving forward. And I think that is the case also of one of the triggers why we're here in Germany now.
So unfortunately, I have to finish it, but it was really an amazing presentation. Talk to someone you don't know and talk about your moments of serendipity. Potentially you have like Tony and Franzi more than one of them. Share them, because I think that's something that lets you go off today and going into the weekend where you can potentially feel encouraged doing something else than you do normally on the weekend. And now I would like to finish with the next talk that we're going to have on the 30th of June. We will announce where it's going to happen, and it's a designer fair, and who will be the speaker. I hope that you enjoyed this morning. I hope you will continue enjoying this morning, and please talk to our speakers and to our team. Thank you very much.